Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into some really cool research. We're talking AMD treatments today, and specifically how to save vision, which, as we all know, is a big concern for people as they get older, right? I mean, it's one of the leading causes of vision loss. And that's where this new drug, Brolucizumab, comes in. It's got this totally unique way of going after that fluid that builds up in the eye.
Yeah, Brolucizumab has been getting a lot of attention lately, and for good reason. The research is showing some promising results, especially for those patients who haven't had much luck with other anti-VEGF treatments. It's like, what else is there?
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually what really jumped out at me with this SHIFT study. They actually zeroed in on these tougher cases, the patients where, like you said, the other treatments just haven't cut it. So they decided, okay, let's try Brolucizumab. And what they found is really interesting. But before we get into all the nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick rundown of what makes Brolucizumab different? I've heard it described as this stealthy ninja that sneaks into the eye tissue.
Okay, well, stealthy ninja might be pushing it a little, but you're right. It is designed to get deeper into those tissues. So picture this. Unlike the bigger, bulkier antibodies, Brolucizumab is a single-chain antibody fragment. It's like the more compact, efficient version, smaller, more concentrated, which basically means it can slip into those hard-to-reach spots that other treatments might miss.
Oh, okay. So it's like sending in a special ops team to tackle that fluid buildup head-on. I like it. So what did this SHIFT study actually reveal about how well it works?
Well, one of the most interesting things they found was that there were some really significant anatomical improvements in the eye. For example, they looked at FCP, which measures the distance between those important layers in the macula. And in the patients who got Brolucizumab, that distance actually got smaller, significantly smaller.
Okay, so the gap is closing. That's a good thing, right? Less swelling.
Exactly. Less swelling, less fluid. They also found a decrease in central subfield retinal thickness. That means the central part of the retina was less swollen, and the overall volume of the macula went down too.
Wow, so basically the eye was looking a lot less inflamed, a lot less bogged down by all that fluid. That's got to be a good sign, right? Did the study track how many patients were able to completely get rid of the fluid?
They did. And it's pretty impressive. In different parts of the retina, too, under the retina, between those retinal layers, even in that sub-RPE space, a really good percentage of patients showed no fluid at all. Anatomically speaking, things were looking much better.
That's amazing, but there's always a but, right? We can't talk about a new treatment without talking about the potential downsides. What about all the safety concerns that have been raised about Brolucizumab?
You're right, we can't ignore those. While these anatomical results are super encouraging, there have been some concerns, especially when it comes to intraocular inflammation. We're talking about IOI here, and in some cases, retinal vasculitis, which is basically inflammation of the blood vessels in the retina. And yeah, the SHIFT study did find a few IOI cases in their patients, 7 out of 63 eyes to be exact.
7 out of 63. So it's not just a hypothetical risk, it's actually happening. That's a little concerning. Were those cases treatable? Did any of those patients end up with permanent vision loss?
Okay, so the good news is that, in this study at least, all the IOI cases were treatable, and none of those patients had any lasting vision loss because of it. But it does really highlight how important it is to keep a close eye on these patients. Early detection is key, especially if we're going to be using Brolucizumab.
Absolutely. You've got to weigh the benefits against the risks, right? And it makes you think, how do you balance those two things when you're dealing with a patient who's basically running out of options? That's got to be a tough call to make.
It really is. It's a decision that we as clinicians need to be prepared to make, and we need to do it carefully. Weighing the individual patient's needs, how severe their AMD is, what treatments they've tried before, and of course, how much risk they're willing to take.
It sounds like having as much information as possible is key, including those findings from other studies, before making any decisions about using this drug, right?
Absolutely, and that's why we're here, right? The SHIFT study is just one piece of the puzzle. We also have these other big studies like Hawk and Harrier that can give us a more complete picture of Brolucizumab, the good and the bad. Right. Hawk and Harrier were much larger, and they were comparing Brolucizumab directly to aflibercept. That's another big one for treating AMD.
And those trials, they focused on patients who were new to treatment, right? Not the tougher cases like in SHIFT. So did they see the same IOI issues popping up there?
They did, yeah. Actually, the number of IOI cases was even higher in those trials, which definitely got everyone's attention.
Okay, so there's a bit of a pattern emerging here. This drug, it's like this powerful engine, right? But maybe it needs some fine-tuning to make sure it doesn't overheat. But all joking aside, this is why we need research like this, right? To help us understand these things.
Exactly. We need these ongoing studies to really get a handle on Brolucizumab's safety, how to manage the risks, and ultimately to figure out who the best candidates for this treatment are.
Right. It's all about finding the right treatment for the right patient. So we've got this drug that seems to be really good at improving things anatomically, even in those tough cases. But we've also got this IOI issue that keeps coming up. How do doctors weigh those two things when they're making decisions for their patients?
It really comes down to looking at each patient individually. We have to think about how severe their AMD is, how well they've responded to other treatments, their overall health, and of course their own personal tolerance for risk. For some patients, the potential benefits of Brolucizumab might outweigh the risks, especially if nothing else has worked for them.
And that's where that open communication between the doctor and the patient is so important, right?
Absolutely. Patients need to have all the information, the good and the bad, and they need to be a part of that decision-making process.
So for those patients where brolucizumab does seem like a good fit, what does that monitoring process look like? What are the warning signs that they should be looking out for?
It's all about being vigilant. We're looking for any signs of inflammation like blurred vision, floaters, eye pain, or if their eyes become really sensitive to light. And those first few weeks after an injection are really important. We have to be ready to act fast if we think IOI might be developing.
So early detection and treatment are key for managing those potential complications.
Exactly. The good news is that in most cases, if we catch it early, IOI can be treated effectively. But it takes a team effort. Patients need to know what to look out for, and they need to feel comfortable speaking up if something doesn't feel right.
It's a partnership for sure. Speaking of partnerships, this deep dive has been quite the journey, wouldn't you say?
It has been fascinating. We've really gotten into the nitty-gritty of Brolucizumab, explored the SHIFT study, and tackled some tough questions about safety.
We've talked about the potential benefits, the risks, and the importance of personalized medicine, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Absolutely. The research on AMD is constantly evolving with new studies, new findings, and hopefully new breakthroughs all the time.
Which is why it's so important to stay informed, to keep learning, and to keep asking questions. As we've seen today, even the most promising treatments can have their complexities.
Well said. It's about staying curious, staying critical, and always putting our patients first.
And on that note, let's take a step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Because while the SHIFT study gives us some really valuable insights into how brolucizumab works in real-world settings, it also highlights a larger trend in AMD research.
And what trend would that be?
The quest for personalized medicine, finding treatments that are tailored to the unique needs of each individual patient.
Ah, yes. The holy grail of modern medicine.
Exactly, because as we've seen with brolucizumab, one size doesn't fit all. What works wonders for one patient might not be right for another. And it's up to us as clinicians to understand those nuances and make the most informed decisions possible.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and embracing the fact that each patient is different.
And that means considering all sorts of factors, not just the clinical data, but the patient's lifestyle, their preferences, their values.
Their fears, their hopes, their aspirations.
Exactly. It's about seeing the whole person, not just the disease.
And using every tool at our disposal to provide the most compassionate, effective, and personalized care we can.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's the perfect segue into our final thoughts on this deep dive into brolucizumab and the SHIFT study. So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are the big takeaways our listeners should remember about brolucizumab?
Well, I think the SHIFT study, along with those larger trials, HEC and Harrier, they all point to the same thing. Brolucizumab, it's a powerful tool, definitely has potential benefits, especially for those trickier AMD cases. But, and this is a big but, it's not a miracle cure. It's got this complex safety profile that we really have to be aware of, you know. We need to be cautious and proactive.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Weighing the positives against the risks. And that can't be easy. What kind of questions do you think this research raises for future studies? What are we still trying to figure out about this drug?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest unknowns is still that long-term safety. I mean, the SHIFT study only followed patients for a month. And while the IOL cases were treatable, we need a bigger picture. We need to know if there are any long-term consequences, you know.
That makes sense. A month gives us some initial insights, but it's just a small window of time.
Exactly. We need those long-term studies to really dig into the chances of IOI happening and any other potential issues with brolucizumab down the line. And then even beyond that, We need to get better at figuring out who's most at risk. Are there any specific traits, any underlying conditions that might make someone more likely to have those inflammatory reactions? Those are the questions we need answers to.
It's like connecting the dots, right? And what about how effective brolucizumab is over time? I mean, the SHIFT study showed some promising anatomical improvements, but we didn't see a huge impact on actual vision, did we?
Yeah, that's an important point. It might be that those vision improvements take a bit longer to show up, or maybe brolucizumab is better at keeping vision stable rather than making it dramatically better, especially in the patients who've already lost some vision. Again, more research is going to be key to understanding those long-term effects.
It seems like we're always saying more research is needed, but that's how we learn, right? Always searching for more answers, always trying to deepen our understanding.
Absolutely. And the research on AMD is moving so fast. New drugs, new treatment approaches, and this bigger focus on personalized medicine. It's all happening right now. Brolucizumab is just one piece of that puzzle.
A piece with a lot of potential, but one we need to handle carefully, right? We really need to understand all the complexities.
Exactly. It's not just about what the drug can do. It's about who it's right for and how to use it responsibly to get the best results.
And that's a message worth repeating. Well, I think this has been a fascinating deep dive. Thanks to everyone for joining us as we explored the world of AMD and the latest research. We hope you learned a lot. Until next time, remember, knowledge is power, and staying curious is the key to providing the best care for our patients.